Halos. These curious discs expressed in art as floating above the heads of particularly holy and worthy people are strange things indeed. They have become ubiquitous with the visions of innocence, untouched purity, the angelic. And most typically, when people think of halos, they think of heaven, Christian heaven. But what exactly is the origin of this curious artistic motif? Why halos? Arguably, halos have an origin in ancient Egypt, with depictions of Ra, the sun god, and the sun disk behind his head. But a more explicit early reference for halos as we would think of them comes from the writings of Homer in the Iliad. If so be that they may come with their ships and succour them, even so did the light flare from the head of Achilles, as he stood by the trench, going beyond the wall. But he did not join the Achaeans, for he heeded the charge which his mother laid upon him. Such divine light is also shown surrounding the head of Apollo, god of the sun, and sometimes in sculpture, for example when Perseus is killing Medusa. One of the wonders of the ancient world, the Colossus of Rhodes, depicted Helios, the sun god, wearing a radiant crown, and it's hardly surprising that Greek and Hellenistic rulers followed suit. Indeed, this tradition spread. In ancient Sumeria, for example, religious texts speak of a visible aura being exuded by gods, heroes, and sometimes even kings. Of course, the Romans followed suit. Here we see, no, not a Christian saint, Apollo once again with the sun disk behind his head, and this is Poseidon depicted in a mosaic riding a chariot, but again with a halo. And if a halo wasn't available, it seems Poseidon was happy to improvise. Naturally, this link between gods, kings, and the divine was expressed in relation to Alexander the Great, portrayed here surrounded by divine light. And through these very same traditions, eventually Christ himself would be depicted as King of Kings with a halo. Now this is familiar, but don't get carried away. Push heavenly thoughts from your mind, because it's worthwhile taking a moment to ask the question, why? Why the halo? I don't know about you, but I've never seen a real-life halo, and they're rather strange objects. I mean, look at how much space they're taking up in this painting. And yet the halo permeates our visual culture. We accept it as a symbol of goodness. It is worth taking a moment to think outside that box, though, because really the halo represents a response, an artistic response to the problem of showing surprise, showing inspiration, and showing the appearance of good ideas before we could simply draw a light bulb above someone's head. And so, for those moments in literature and art where conventional words and imagery defy us, halos became a thing. The 1st century AD saw halos appearing in the Kushan Empire. Early rulers such as Hyrieus had been exposed to goods and art coming from the Mediterranean. Here, for example, is a Roman coin, recovered from the Ahanposh monastery. The back and forth of trade and ideas soon saw Kushan rulers giving themselves halos on coins. Here is a Kushan casket from around 127 AD, depicting Brahma, Buddha, and Indra with halos. And soon depictions of the Buddha and Buddhist art would imply enlightenment through the presence of a halo, or indeed halos, of different colours. The Buddha, for example, would have a halo which was green, whereas Buddhist monks and saints would have orange halos, one for the head and one for the body. And eventually rulers got in on the act. Here we see a Mughal emperor with an extraordinarily large halo. So now, what about the halo we're probably most familiar with, the Christian halo? Well, as with so many other things, it was adopted from Greek and Roman traditions. But again, as with so many other things, they were subject to rules and debate. For example, one question was, when did Jesus get his halo? For many, the answer to this was when he was baptized by John the Baptist. In Christian art, there were different types of halo. For example, a halo with a cross indicated the presence of a member of the Trinity. A triangular halo is reserved for one aspect of the Trinity, God the Father. And interestingly, square halos were reserved for donor portraits, usually of living people who have commissioned perhaps a church or certainly a piece of religious art. For everyone else, including saints and even Mary, a simple gold disc sufficed. So, for more than 1,000 years, Christian art comfortably used halos to highlight the divine and the divinely inspired. But by the 15th and 16th centuries, halos were increasingly problematic. Artists were increasingly striving for, and indeed being commissioned to paint, realism, and halos were getting in the way. Artists such as Michelangelo strove for compositions uncluttered by halos. And of course, the understated elegance of Da Vinci's Last Supper would be entirely obliterated with the presence of halos. So yes, halos are strange things indeed. Today, halos survive as symbols of being good, being angelic even. And sometimes the symbol of the halo is deliberately subverted to be ironic, being naughty. But it was never meant to be so simple. Halos represent the artistic desire to capture the uncapturable, that moment of divine intervention, the moment we had a good idea, or perhaps steered clear of a bad one. That moment of inspiration we all wish we had a little more often.